Control the air, control the battlefield, lose the air, lose everything. Since Pearl Harbor, Japanese pilots had shown superiority in training, tactics, and technology. The Zero could outmaneuver any American fighter. It could climb more swiftly, fly greater distances, and its experienced pilots had honed their skills in China, facing off against weaker opponents. The Imperial Japanese Navy's elite air group stationed at Rabaul represented the pinnacle of naval aviation in the Pacific. With 700 aircraft and pilots boasting hundreds of combat hours, they were veterans who had triumphed over the British at Singapore, the Dutch in the East Indies, and the Americans at Pearl Harbor. Among them were men like Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai, who achieved over 60 victories, and Warrant Officer Hiroyoshi Nishizawa, who would earn the title of Japan's Ace of Aces with over 80 kills before his demise. These individuals were not just pilots, they were true masters of aerial warfare, and their canvas was the sky above the Solomons. The Tainan Air Group, the 250th 1st Air Group, and the 204th Air Group comprised the best of Japanese naval aviation pilots who had trained for years before the war, men who viewed their aircraft as extensions of themselves. Lieutenant Junichi Sasai, who led the Tainan Air Group, crafted tactics that enhanced the strengths of the Zeros while reducing their vulnerabilities. His pilots flew in loose formations that encouraged individual initiative while ensuring they supported one another. They had mastered the turning fight, leveraging the Zero's remarkable maneuverability to get behind an enemy and stay there until a kill was assured. The F4U Corsair rested on the dusty coral of Henderson Field like a trapped beast. Its inverted gull wings gave it a distinctive silhouette, a shape that would soon haunt the nightmares of Japanese pilots. Equipped with a Pratt & Whitney Air 2800 double wasp engine generating 2,000 horsepower, the Corsair could reach speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour. The massive 13-foot 4-inch Hamilton Standard propeller necessitated the unique bent wing design to ensure sufficient ground clearance. It was armed with 6 Browning M2.50 caliber machine guns, each capable of firing 750 rounds per minute. 400 for each of the inner guns and 375 for the outer pairs, providing enough firepower to slice a Zero in half with just a 2-second burst. However, the specifications only revealed part of the picture. The Corsair was initially deemed too hazardous for carrier operations. Its elongated nose obstructed forward visibility during landings, and its left wing tended to stall before the right, leading to dangerous snap rolls at low speeds. Additionally, the tailwheel of the Oliot Strat often bounced on carrier decks, sending the aircraft back into the air at the worst possible time. The Navy had turned it down for carrier service, labeling it an ensign eliminator. Yet, these very traits that made it risky to fly also rendered it deadly in combat. The same power that complicated its handling provided it with unparalleled acceleration and climb rate. Its sturdy construction, which added weight, also allowed it to endure punishment that would cripple lighter fighters. Lieutenant Kenneth Walsh of VMF 124 had only logged 25 hours in the Corsair before arriving at Guadalcanal. A former enlisted man who earned his wings through hard work rather than a privileged background, Walsh had a solid grasp of machinery. Born in Brooklyn and raised in Jersey City, he joined the Marine Corps in 1933 at the age of 17. Before earning his wings, he worked as an aircraft mechanic, giving him a deep understanding of what made planes function and what caused them to fail. The Corsair was more than just an airplane, it was 14,000 pounds of controlled chaos, and if you could master its temperament, you wielded death's own scythe. The pilots of VMF 124 represented a diverse slice of American society: farmers from Iowa who had never seen the ocean before joining the Marines, college graduates who sacrificed comfortable futures for the pursuit of flying, and former mechanics and store clerks who had discovered a talent for aviation. What they all had in common was their youth. Most were in their early 20s and had limited combat experience. Vunacaneo, Lacunai, Rapapo, Tobara, and Caravat. Simpson Harbor served as a port for the combined fleets, including cruisers and destroyers. The town itself accommodated thousands of support staff, including mechanics, armorers, communications experts, and medical personnel. It was the Gibraltar of the South Pacific, seemingly unbeatable with its ring of fighters and anti-aircraft defenses. Lieutenant Takeshi Maeda of the 204th Air Group went over the morning reconnaissance reports, noting that American strength at Guadalcanal was estimated at 40 to 50 fighters of various types. Most were outdated P-40S and stubby F-4F Wildcats, which were no match for the Zeros. The 204th had just arrived at Rabaul to fill the gaps left by the Tainan Air Group, which had been redesignated as the 251st. Many pilots in this unit were seasoned veterans from the China campaign, having sharpened their skills against both Chinese and Soviet forces. They considered the Americans to be inferior adversaries, lacking the spiritual discipline and commitment of Japanese warriors. However, the morning reconnaissance photos revealed something unexpected. There were 24 aircraft featuring unique bent wings, larger than Wildcats and longer than P-40s. Naval intelligence couldn't classify them. They were likely yet another hasty American design thrown into action. The Americans consistently tried to make up for their pilots' shortcomings with heavier weapons and armor. It hadn't paid off with the Buffalo. It hadn't worked with the P-39. So why would this new aircraft be any different? VMF 124's inaugural combat mission took off at 0800 on February 12, 1943, with 12 Corsairs departing from Henderson Field to escort a PBY Catalina rescue mission to Sandfly Bay, Vella La Vella. Keep formation, watch your wingman's tail, and never engage a zero in a turn. Leverage the Corsair's strengths, speed, firepower, and resilience, hit and run, dive and climb, and avoid turning fights with a zero at low altitude. 20 minutes into the flight, Lieutenant Kenneth Walsh spotted motion below 9 Zeros climbing from the southeast, gearing up for an assault on the slow-moving Catalina. They likely took off from Bowen or Balarl, forward bases the Japanese used to extend their fighter coverage. Walsh's voice crackled over the radio, calling out bandits at 8 o'clock low and climbing. The moment of truth had come. 12 American rookies in an untested fighter facing off against 9 Japanese veterans flying the war's most successful aircraft. Walsh rolled upside down and executed a split S, diving from 18,000 feet. The Corsair accelerated like nothing he had ever experienced. The airspeed indicator soared past 350, 400, and then 425 miles per hour. The controls stiffened but remained responsive. At this speed, the Zeros wouldn't be able to keep up even if they wanted to. Their wings would buckle under the strain, torn off by aerodynamic forces their designers had never foreseen. He aimed at the trailing enemy fighter, waited until its wingspan filled his gun sight, and squeezed the trigger. 6 streams of armor-piercing incendiary rounds converged at 900 feet. The API ammunition was catastrophic against the Zero's exposed fuel tanks. The Japanese fighter disintegrated without an explosion or fire, simply breaking apart in the air like a toy crushed by an unseen hammer. The wings detached from the fuselage, and the engine ripped free from its mounts. The pilot had no opportunity to eject. Walsh pulled up sharply, G-forces pinning him into his seat as he climbed back to altitude. 1 pass, 1 kill. The other Corsairs followed suit, diving and climbing, leveraging their superior speed to slice through the Japanese formation. The engagement lasted 4 minutes. As the Zeros retreated, 3 of them were plummeting into the sea in fragments. No Corsairs were lost, not a single one had even taken a hit. The tactical landscape had changed dramatically. The hunters were now the hunted. The remaining Japanese fighters, likely from the 582nd Air Group that had just arrived at Rabaul, sped north at full throttle. They had seen something that upended everything they thought they knew about air combat. That evening in Rabaul, the debriefing was serious. The surviving pilots described a new American fighter with unmatched speed and firepower. Their report was thorough and concerning. They encountered a new type of American fighter over Vella La Vella, with superior speed and dive capabilities, as well as extraordinary firepower, making traditional turning combat ineffective. The armor protection rendered their 7.7mm guns nearly useless. They requested immediate intelligence on the aircraft's identity and performance specifications. This report marked the first acknowledgement that a significant shift had occurred in the air war over the Solomon Islands. Within a week, Japanese pilots had named the new American fighter Whistling Death. The name was inspired by the unique sound the Corsair produced during a high-speed dive, a wailing noise created by air rushing through the oil cooler intakes in the wing roots. It was a sound that heralded destruction, a battle cry signaling imminent doom from above. Ground troops on islands occupied by the Japanese came to dread it. When they heard that whistle, death was just moments away. The effects were swift and significant. Japanese bombing raids on Guadalcanal, once accompanied by a dozen fighters, now needed 20 or 30 for escort. Even then, the losses were substantial. The Corsair's speed gave it the advantage to dictate when and how to engage. Japanese pilots found themselves perpetually on the defensive, attempting to shield bombers while being systematically targeted by swift assaults they could not repel. By March 1943, all 8 Marine fighter squadrons in the Solomons had switched to Corsairs. VMF-121, VMF-122, VMF-123, VMF-213, VMF-214, VMF-215, VMF-221, and VMF-222 each received their share of the bent-wing fighters. The transition came at a price. 7 aircraft were lost to operational mishaps in the first month, casualties of the Corsairs demanding flight traits. Landing accidents were frequent. The long nose made it difficult for pilots to see the runway during their final approach. They had to take a curved route, only aligning with the runway at the last second. If they miscalculated, the immense torque from the large propeller could flip the plane upside down. However, those who mastered the bent-wing design found themselves wielding a machine that could overpower any rival. The Corsair revolutionized air combat in the Pacific. The tactical shift was swift and impactful. American pilots moved away from the turning dogfights that benefited the nimble Zero. Instead, they adopted boom and zoom tactics, launching diving attacks from a height, firing, and then climbing back out of reach before the enemy could react. The Corsair could dive at speeds capable of ripping a Zero's wings off. It could withstand damage that would obliterate lighter Japanese fighters. Most crucially, it could intercept and destroy any Japanese aircraft from a position of strength. The Japanese made efforts to adapt. New strategies were crafted at training bases in Japan. They focused on coordinated assaults from various angles, aiming to draw Corsairs into low-speed turning engagements and targeting the aircraft's few weak points. These included the oil cooler intakes and the cockpit canopy rails where the armor was thinnest. However, each adjustment was met with American advancements. When Japanese pilots figured out how to attack from directly behind to steer clear of the forward-firing guns, Corsair pilots implemented the thatch weave, a defensive tactic that ensured mutual support. When Zeros attempted to take advantage of their superior climb rate at low speeds, Corsairs simply avoided engagement below 250 miles per hour. On April 1, 1943, Lieutenant Walsh led a group of 4 Corsairs on a fighter sweep over the Russell Islands. The morning was clear, with scattered clouds at 10,000 feet offering ideal concealment. 30 Zeros took off from Monday Airfield to intercept them. Dive, shoot, climb, and reposition. His wingman, Lieutenant Archie Donahue, added 2 more to the tally. The 4 Corsairs reported 11 victories with no losses. Upon landing at Henderson Field, mechanics found only 6 bullet holes across all 4 planes. The Zero's 7.7mm machine guns were incapable of piercing the Corsair's armor. Their 20mm cannons, effective against lighter aircraft, needed sustained fire to inflict damage on the sturdy American fighter. However, achieving those hits required surviving long enough to take aim, and given the Corsair's speed and firepower, survival was becoming increasingly improbable. The armor plate behind the pilot's seat was thick enough to stop 20mm rounds. The windscreen was made of bulletproof glass that could withstand anything short of a direct hit from a cannon. The self-sealing fuel tanks could endure multiple bullet holes without igniting. The Japanese response indicated a growing sense of desperation. Intelligence from Coastal Watch reports showed that experienced pilots were being pulled from Rabaul and sent back to Japan to train new recruits. But training took time, and losses were piling up faster than replacements could be trained. The Japanese Navy's carefully nurtured group of expert pilots, men with years of training and combat experience, was being decimated over the Solomons. By May 13, 1943, Kenneth Walsh accomplished something no American pilot had ever achieved. He became the first Corsair ace with 5 confirmed kills. His 5th victory occurred during a chaotic battle over the Russell Islands, where Walsh faced off against 3 Zeros alone. Rather than retreating, which would have been the smart choice, he chose to engage. Leveraging the Corsair's superior speed, he made 3 attacks, downing 1 Zero with each pass. The last Japanese pilot, likely a seasoned veteran due to his aggressive tactics, attempted to draw Walsh into a turning dogfight at 5,000 feet. Walsh countered by climbing vertically, going straight up until the Zero stalled and dropped away. He then rolled and dove, catching the Zero as it tried to regain control. A long burst from the 650s ripped the enemy fighter apart. Just 2 weeks later, Walsh's tally reached 10. The change was astonishing. In just 3 months, a pilot with limited experience in a rejected Navy fighter had risen to become one of America's top aces. Ascend above the enemy, dive at full speed, fire at close quarters, and climb away before they understood what had happened. On January 14, 1944, he downed 5 Japanese fighters in a single sortie, systematically taking them out one by one as they attempted to defend a bomber group. The true surprise for Japanese pilots came not from individual aces, but from the combined effectiveness of Corsair squadrons. The aircraft's range, exceeding 1,000 miles with external tanks, allowed it to escort bombers all the way to Arabal and return. In the past, Japanese fighters only needed to wait for American escorts to turn back before attacking the unprotected bombers. Now, however, the Corsairs accompanied the bombers all the way to their targets and back, transforming what used to be easy missions for Japanese interceptors into perilous challenges. On June 16, 1943, more than 100 Japanese aircraft took off from Arabal to strike American shipping at Guadalcanal, but they faced 32 Corsairs from 4 Marine squadrons. The ensuing battle showcased a dramatic shift in air superiority in the Pacific. The Japanese formation featured new Model 32-0S, designed with a reduced wingspan for better maneuverability, alongside Model 22-0S equipped with upgraded weaponry. It made no difference, 77 Japanese planes were shot down, while the Corsairs lost only 6, leading to a staggering 13-to-1 kill ratio that would be consistently repeated. Lieutenant Commander Takedo Tanemasu, a seasoned pilot with over 30 victories, survived the clash and reported back. The new American fighters engage in combat differently than we do. They attack from above like hawks, unleash their devastating firepower, and then retreat before we can respond. Our Zero fighters are no longer the best. We are being decimated by an enemy we can't pursue and can't evade. Admiral Yamamoto received this report just weeks before his disastrous encounter with American P-38s, another instance of American fighters leveraging their superior speed and firepower to obliterate Japanese aviation. The psychological effect of the Corsairs surpassed even their tactical achievements. Japanese pilots, who had never faced defeat, began to feel fear. The unique sound of a diving Corsair became a source of primal terror. Ground crews at forward bases reported that pilots were turning down missions when Corsairs were confirmed to be present. Some pilots even developed unexplained ailments that kept them grounded during raids escorted by Corsairs. The illusion of Japanese air superiority, carefully nurtured since the war's onset, vanished in the fury of Corsair gunfire. In the summer of 1943, the role of the Corsair expanded beyond just fighter missions. Marine pilots realized the aircraft could carry bombs, starting with a single 500-pound bomb and later a 1,000-pound bomb on the centerline rack. The Corsair evolved into a fighter bomber, capable of battling its way to a target, delivering ordnance with dive bomber precision, and then returning home. Japanese positions that were previously safe from fighter strafing now faced devastating bomb attacks from Corsairs. VMF 214, known as the Black Sheep Squadron under Major Gregory Pappy Boyington, showcased the Corsair's impact on air combat. Already an ace from his experience with the Flying Tigers in China, Boyington understood both the Zero and the Corsair. His tactical innovations highlighted the Corsair's strengths while countering the Zero's advantages. The Black Sheep were essentially a mix of replacement pilots, misfits, and troublemakers who didn't quite fit in with other squadrons. Boyington transformed them into the most effective fighter squadron in the Solomons. They were nicknamed orphans, as they were pilots without a permanent squadron assignment, but under Boyington's command, they became lethal. In just 84 days of combat, VMF 214 shot down 97 Japanese aircraft while losing only 12 Corsairs, achieving an impressive 8-to-1 kill ratio that would have seemed impossible just months before. They also sank 21 vessels, ranging from barges to destroyers, and targeted numerous ground installations. On September 16, 1943, Boyington directed 24 Corsairs on a fighter sweep over Bailleul, a Japanese airfield located at the southern tip of Bougainville. Intelligence reports suggested a significant buildup of Japanese fighters at the base. As they approached, 50 Zeros rose up to intercept them, swarming like furious hornets from the coral strip. In previous conflicts, such odds would have been a death sentence, but Boyington had prepared his pilots to master energy management, ensuring they maintained their speed and altitude advantage at all costs. Stay high, stay fast, and avoid giving the enemy a predictable target. He would plunge from 25,000 feet, come in from the sun, fire a quick burst, and then climb back to altitude before the Japanese realized they were being attacked. The reasons behind the Corsair's superiority were varied. The power of the R-2800 engines allowed it to maintain energy during vertical maneuvers that would cause a Zero to stall. At high altitudes, where the air was thinner, the Corsair's supercharged engine kept delivering power, while the performance of the Zeros significantly declined. The efficiency of the Hamilton standard propeller contributed to superior acceleration and climb rates above 10,000 feet. The aircraft's sturdy design, reinforced cockpit armor, self-sealing fuel tanks, and backup control systems allowed it to withstand damage that could have destroyed 3 Zeros. The Corsair's weaponry was formidable, with .50 caliber machine guns that could deliver 80 rounds per second at 300 yards. Its armor-piercing incendiary rounds could penetrate engine blocks, ignite fuel tanks, and tear apart control surfaces. Japanese pilots claimed that getting hit by Corsair fire felt like being hit by sledgehammers. Aircraft didn't just go down, they often disintegrated in mid-air. However, technology alone wasn't enough to win battles. The American industrial capability produced not only aircraft but also pilots. While Japan struggled to train replacements for their increasing losses, American training programs were churning out hundreds of qualified pilots every month. The Naval Air Training Command grew from just 2 main bases before the war to numerous facilities nationwide. The enemy's new fighter has transformed air combat. Our tactics, honed over many years, have become outdated. We require new aircraft, new training, and a complete overhaul. But we are out of time. They are taking us out quicker than we can adapt. His report to Tokyo suggested ceasing offensive operations and conserving the remaining pilots for the defense of the home islands. This recommendation was overlooked. The harsh math of attrition was relentless. Japan started the Solomons campaign with about 400 frontline pilots in the region. By August 1943, over 300 had perished. The replacements were both inexperienced and lacked skill. In contrast, the quality of American pilots steadily improved. Each returning veteran shared their knowledge with newcomers. Tactics honed in battle were quickly integrated into training. The learning curve that cost so many American lives in 1942 became a valuable teaching resource in 1943. The Corsair even sparked innovation in other areas. Confronted with the aircraft's initial difficulties in landing on carriers, the British Fleet Air Arm developed new techniques. They found that a curved approach to the carrier deck, keeping the landing signal officer in view until the last moment, resolved the visibility issue. A tweak to the tail wheel oleostrut helped minimize bouncing. Enhanced pilot training tailored to the Corsair's features led to fewer accidents. By late 1944, Corsairs were effectively operating from American carriers, boosting the firepower of fast carrier task forces. VF-17, the Navy's Jolly Rogers under Lieutenant Commander John Tommy Blackburn, showcased the Corsair's adaptability beyond just fighter roles. Initially assigned to the carrier Bunker Hill, the squadron was stationed on land in the Solomon Islands due to the Navy's worries about the Corsair's suitability for carrier operations. This turned out to be a fortunate decision. Operating from shore bases allowed VF-17 to fully leverage the Corsair's advantages in range and payload. Blackburn's pilots were the first to use Corsair fighter bombers, attaching 1,000-pound bombs beneath the centerline. They also created dive bombing techniques specific to the Corsair, finding that lowering the landing gear served as an effective dive brake. On November 11, 1943, during the attack on Rabaul, VF-17's Corsairs shot down 18 Japanese planes, then successfully dropped their bombs on target before downing 5 more while retreating. The multi-role capability of the Corsair allowed it to switch from interceptor to offensive weapon seamlessly. The squadron's performance was exceptional. In just 76 days of combat, the Jolly Rogers destroyed 152 Japanese aircraft, almost 2 per day. Squadron leader Tommy Blackburn personally recorded 11 victories. More importantly, VF-17 never lost a bomber they were escorting to enemy fighters. Their protection was foolproof. Japanese pilots quickly learned that attacking American bombers meant encountering Corsairs, and facing them often led to certain death. Individual pilots in VF-17 achieved outstanding success. Lieutenant Ira Kepfert became the Navy's first Corsair ace, ultimately claiming 17 victories. His strategy involved getting very close before opening fire. He would swoop down on an enemy aircraft, waiting to shoot until he could clearly see the pilot in the cockpit, then unleash a devastating burst from all 6 guns at point-blank range. It was a risky tactic, but it worked. During one mission, he shot down 4 Japanese fighters in just minutes, each using less than 100 rounds. The Japanese Navy's reaction showed their desperation. The new Model 52-0 came with enhancements, including heavier armament with belt-fed 20mm cannons, improved armor with a 55mm bulletproof glass windscreen, and an increased dive speed of 460 miles per hour. However, these upgrades added weight, compromising the Zero's renowned maneuverability without rivaling the Corsair's power. It was an acknowledgement of defeat in engineering, an attempt to combat the Corsair on its own terms, which was bound to fail due to Japan's industrial constraints. The Japanese also rolled out new aircraft designs, such as the Kawanishi and 1KJ George, specifically aimed at countering American fighters like the Corsair. Equipped with heavy weapons, armor, and solid performance, it was a powerful adversary. However, it arrived too late and in insufficient numbers to make an impact. By the time a significant force reached the combat units, most of Japan's seasoned pilots had already been lost. Lieutenant Niyoshi Kano, one of Japan's most aggressive aces with over 30 victories, devised specialized tactics to counter the Corsair. His approach involved climbing directly beneath the enemy, unleashing a single, powerful burst, and then stalling away before the Corsair could respond. On December 17, 1943, Kano successfully shot down 2 Corsairs using this strategy. But during his third attempt, Lieutenant Robert Hanson of VMF 215 was prepared. Anticipating Kano's move, Hanson dove through his own formation and caught the Japanese ace in a climbing turn. In just 2 seconds, 6.50 caliber rounds ended Kano's career. Even the finest pilots in Japan could no longer hold their ground. The isolation of Rabaul represented a significant victory for the Corsair. By November 1943, the once formidable Japanese stronghold was under constant assault from Corsair-escorted bombers. The 5 airfields were reduced to craters. Simpson Harbor had become a graveyard of submerged ships. The 100,000 Japanese troops stationed there were cut off, left to languish as the war moved on without them. This outcome was not the result of an expensive invasion but rather the application of air power, with the Corsair playing a key role. By January 1944, American Corsairs dominated the skies over the Solomons. Japanese operations during the day completely halted. Raids were now conducted at night or in conditions that grounded American fighters. The few experienced Japanese pilots left were pulled back to defend the inner perimeter. In their stead were inexperienced boys who could barely fly, let alone engage in combat. They perished en masse, with entire formations often annihilated without securing a single victory. Lieutenant Sadamuka Machi, one of the last surviving Japanese aces, recorded in his diary. "Today, I witnessed 12 of our fighters confront 8 American Corsairs. Within moments, 9 of ours went down in flames. The few who remained fled. I didn't try to assist. What could one more Zero accomplish? The battle in the skies is lost. We are already as good as dead, our bodies just haven't caught on yet." The Corsair's influence reached far beyond mere victory counts. Strategic bombing missions that were once impossible due to Japanese interception now proceeded without hindrance. American ground forces moved forward with constant close air support. Supply lines that once needed heavy fighter escorts now operated under the protective coverage of Corsairs from various island bases. The aircraft's 1,000-mile range meant no place in the Solomons was safe from American air power. Marine First Lieutenant Kenneth Walsh's actions on August 15 and 30, 1943, exemplified the Corsair's supremacy. On the 15th, outnumbered 6-1, Walsh repeatedly dove into a Japanese formation that was attacking American shipping, managing to destroy 2 dive bombers and 1 fighter, even though his Corsair was hit multiple times. The armor plating saved his life. A post-flight inspection revealed over 50 bullet holes in his aircraft, but none penetrated critical areas. 2 weeks later, on August 30th, after his engine failed during an escort mission, Walsh landed at Munda, quickly jumped into another Corsair, and took off to rejoin his squadron. Encountering 50 Zeros alone over Kahili, he attacked without hesitation. In the ensuing dogfight, he shot down 4 enemy fighters before being shot down himself. He survived by bailing out over the ocean and spent hours in his life raft before being rescued by a flying boat. He was awarded the Medal of Honor and returned to combat. By the end of his service, Walsh's score stood at 21 victories, all achieved in Corsairs and all against supposedly superior Japanese pilots. The technological gap grew with each new Corsair variant. The F4U featured a bubble canopy for better visibility, fixing one of the aircraft's few flaws. The seat was elevated by 7 inches, enhancing the pilot's sightline. The F4U-1C replaced machine guns with 420mm cannons, each holding 120 rounds. Its firepower was formidable, a single burst could rip the wing off a Zero. The F4U-1D could carry either 2 1,000-pound bombs or 8 5-inch rockets along with its guns. Later models were capable of carrying tiny TIM rockets, napalm tanks, or even a torpedo. Each enhancement was a response to combat lessons, with modifications made within months of their identification. When pilots reported carbon monoxide entering the cockpit, engineers revamped the exhaust system. When the tail wheel strut was too rigid for carrier landings, it was softened with new oleos. When pilots requested improved radio gear, updated sets were put in place. Japanese aircraft development, hampered by a lack of resources and industrial constraints, struggled to keep up with the pace of innovation. By February 1944, it had been a year since the Corsair's first combat appearance. In that time, Marine and Navy Corsair squadrons had downed over 600 Japanese aircraft while suffering fewer than 80 losses to enemy fire. This 11-to-1 kill ratio indicated not just tactical dominance, but a strategic shift. Air superiority, which had once been Japan's strongest asset, had turned into America's key to victory. The statistics were astonishing. Corsair squadrons consistently achieved remarkable kill ratios in battle after battle. Individual pilots were becoming aces in just a single mission. Japanese formations were being decimated without the attackers sustaining any losses. It wasn't just fighting, it was a slaughter. Both the Japanese and Americans were aware of this reality and what it implied for the war's future. Captain Minoru Genda, the mastermind behind the Pearl Harbor attack and Japan's leading aerial strategist, evaluated the situation with his usual candor in a report to the Naval General Staff. The Corsair has rendered our entire naval aviation strategy outdated. We spent 2 decades preparing for a conflict that no longer exists. The Americans changed the game, developed a superior aircraft, and trained more skilled pilots. We simply can't catch up. Our only option is to face our end with honor. The human toll was devastating. Japan lost around 2,000 naval aviators during the Solomon Islands campaign, most to Corsairs. These were not merely pilots, but also instructors, squadron leaders, and tactical pioneers, irreplaceable knowledge built up over many years. The pre-war Japanese Navy took 3 years to train a carrier pilot. By 1944, they were sending young recruits into battle with less than 6 months of training. The outcomes were both predictable and tragic. While American losses were considerable, they were manageable. Industrial production allowed for Corsairs to be produced more quickly than they were lost in combat. By 1944, production was at 300 Corsairs per month, equating to 1 every 82 minutes. Goodyear and Brewster licensed their production as the FG and F3A variants. Following Pearl Harbor, pilot training programs expanded significantly, producing qualified replacements who arrived in the field better prepared than those before them. Each new generation of Corsair pilots proved more lethal than the last, benefiting from a compounded experience of combat and accumulated knowledge. The psychological impact of the Corsairs was as formidable as their physical might. Tokyo Rose, the English-language propaganda broadcaster, recognized the aircraft's influence in her nightly broadcasts, cautioning American pilots that the whistling death could bring doom to its own pilots as well. However, her threats lacked credibility. Japanese pilots understood the reality: when Corsairs showed up, survival meant fleeing, and even that might not suffice. Major Gregory Pappy Boyington's last combat exemplified both the strength and the limitations of the Corsairs. On January 3, 1944, while leading a sweep over rubble, Boyington shot down his 26th and 27th enemy aircraft before being downed himself. His Corsair was struck by ground fire and enemy fighters, ultimately succumbing to the accumulated damage. Although he survived, he was captured and spent the remainder of the war in Japanese prison camps. His loss highlighted that even with a superior aircraft, war remained perilous. Nevertheless, his squadrons continued to achieve success without him, shooting down an additional 94 Japanese planes, demonstrating that the Corsair's advantage went beyond just individual skill. The Black Sheep Squadron remained one of the top-scoring squadrons in the Pacific, with or without their renowned leader. The aircraft itself had become a game-changer, transforming average pilots into killers and skilled pilots into legends. The strategic consequences reverberated throughout the Pacific. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's death in April 1943, shot down by P-38 Lightnings thanks to Corsair suppression of Japanese fighters, removed Japan's most capable naval strategist. The isolation and reduction of rubble, accomplished through Corsair air superiority, eliminated Japan's key base without any invasion. The Marine Island hopping campaign gained momentum, with each landing backed by Corsair squadrons that ensured American forces would always have air cover. During the 1944 Philippines campaign, Corsairs operated from both land bases and aircraft carriers. By this time, the initial challenges of carrier landings had been resolved with a mix of pilot training and aircraft adjustments. Marine squadrons VMF-124 and VMF-213 operated from the USS Essex, providing essential fleet defense and ground support. Their presence over Leyte Gulf was crucial for securing American victory in the largest naval battle in history. The Corsair also transformed carrier operations doctrine. Initially deemed unsuitable for carriers, British Royal Navy pilots developed methods to safely land this challenging aircraft on flight decks. The curved approach they established became the standard for all carrier aircraft operations. Their success prompted the U.S. Navy to take a second look, and by late 1944, Corsairs were flying from American aircraft carriers. By the end of the war, they were deployed on numerous carriers, spreading their lethal impact throughout the Pacific. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai, Japan's most renowned surviving ace, encountered Corsairs over Iwo Jima in June 1944. Despite his extensive experience and over 60 victories, he barely made it out alive. His Zero was peppered with bullets, his cockpit filled with smoke, and only his exceptional flying skills enabled his escape. His evaluation was straightforward. Battling Corsairs in a Zero was akin to taking on a modern tank with a cavalry sword, brave, perhaps, but foolish and ultimately deadly. The Mariana Campaign in June 1944 showcased the Corsair's development as a weapon system. During the Great Mariana Turkey Shoot on June 19, while the Hellcat was the Navy's main fighter, Marine Corsair squadrons operating from island bases played a significant role in the devastation. In just one day, Japanese naval aviation lost more than 400 aircraft, primarily to American fighters. The kill ratios were so extreme that American pilots felt remorse over the carnage. It wasn't a battle, it was more like target practice. The statistics paint a clear picture. By August 1945, Corsairs had shot down 2,140 Japanese aircraft in air-to-air engagements. They had dropped 15,621 tons of bombs, accounting for 70% of all bombs released by U.S. Navy and Marine fighters during the Pacific War. Over 400 Japanese ships were either sunk or damaged due to Corsair strikes. The aircraft that initially struggled to operate from carriers went on to become the most successful naval fighter in history. Production continued until 1953, with a total of 12,571 Corsairs manufactured, marking the longest production run for any fighter from World War II. At Okinawa, Corsairs played a crucial role in countering kamikaze attacks, as their speed enabled them to intercept suicide planes before they could reach the fleet. Their firepower ensured that kamikazes, once struck, were completely obliterated rather than merely damaged and capable of continuing their mission. Marine pilots referred to it as turkey shooting, but it was a matter of life and death. Just one kamikaze getting through could sink a destroyer or inflict damage on a carrier. However, statistics couldn't convey the human aspect. Each down zero meant a dead or captured Japanese pilot, someone's son, husband, or father. The slow realization among Japanese aviators that they were facing not just defeat but total destruction fostered a sense of fatalism. Kamikaze tactics, born of desperation, marked the final recognition that engaging in conventional air combat against Corsairs was a futile endeavor with little purpose. Young Ensign Takedo Yamamoto, who arrived at Rabaul in March 1944 with only 90 hours of total flight time, survived just one encounter with Corsairs. His diary, found after the war, contained a solitary entry. "I saw the bent-wing devils today, 3 members of my training class are dead. I ran away. I feel ashamed, but at least I'm still alive. Tomorrow, I might join them. The Americans aren't fighting fair, they're just executing us." The legacy of the Corsairs went beyond World War II. Throughout their service, Corsairs conducted 80% of all close support missions for the U.S. Navy and Marines. The F4U variant, with a powerful 2,300 horsepower engine, could carry 4,000 pounds of munitions. Lieutenant G. Bourdillon became the Navy's only ace in service and the sole pro-pace pilot flying a Corsair night fighter, having shot down 5 North Korean planes. French Navy Corsairs engaged in combat in Indochina, supporting Legion troops at Dien Bien Phu. The aircraft remained in production until 1953, serving various air forces around the globe. Corsairs even made their last combat appearance in 1969 during the soccer war between Honduras and El Salvador, with both sides flying them, marking the final piston-engine fighter combat in history. The Corsair provided us with air superiority whenever and wherever it was necessary. Without the Corsair, the island-hopping campaign would have been unfeasible. It was the key that breached Japanese defenses throughout the Pacific. The final acknowledgement came from an unlikely source. In his post-war memoir, Emperor Hirohito pinpointed 3 factors that made Japan's defeat unavoidable: American industrial strength, the atomic bomb, and the Corsair fighter. "When our pilots could no longer challenge the skies," he noted, "our islands became impossible to defend." The Corsair was the weapon that severed the Empire's lifeline. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, who emerged from the war with 64 victories, offered perhaps the most insightful evaluation. The Zero was like a rapier, light, nimble, lethal in skilled hands. The Corsair was more akin to a broadsword, heavy, powerful, and crushing everything in its way. In a samurai's hands, the rapier excels, but the Americans wielded 10 broadswords for every rapier we had, and they didn't need to be samurai to use them effectively. On a humid morning in September 1945, as American occupation forces arrived in Japan, a squadron of Marine Corsairs soared above. Their bent wings cast shadows over Tokyo Bay, where just 2 years earlier, Japanese pilots had been dominant. The war was finished, but the message was unmistakable. You didn't fight Corsairs, you merely survived them, if you were exceptionally fortunate and quick. Most of us were neither. The bent-wing bird represented death itself, and in the end, death always prevails. The physical remnants of the Corsair's supremacy are scattered throughout the Pacific. From Guadalcanal to Okinawa, the aluminum remains of downed aircraft share their tales. Yet, the statistics are revealing. For each Corsair wreck found, researchers uncovered 10 or more Japanese planes. Some were brought down in combat, while others were destroyed on the ground. For every Corsair resting on the ocean floor, 11 zeros lie alongside it. The calculus of victory, inscribed in metal and counted in lives, demonstrated that when technology, training, and industrial power came together, the outcome was not a battle but an execution. The Corsair didn't just win a war, it transformed the very essence of air combat, showing that superior technology, when effectively utilized, could surpass any advantage in skill or experience. The era of the lone warrior ace was fading. The era of systematic technological air dominance had begun, painted in deep blue with inverted gull wings and heralded by a whistling death from above.